Show Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is a very interesting topic, a very interesting show for people to talk about, a very realization point of how Africans or the African nationalities, the African nations came to the point of to the point where they are now. You see, since the times of colonial era, the times of colonial powers, and up to date. And so, from today, we'll be talking about Pan Africanist leaders who saw, or those leaders who founded this great movement, and also the African nationalists who saw the continuation of this particular movement across the world. And so today we are going to talk about this particular leader, Marcus Garvey, who is a very great, I refer him to as a great man of all times. His origin is Jamaica, and he lived between the year 1887 to 1940. He was a Jamaican born black nationalist and founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA. He popularized a program of racial pride, economic self-reliance, and a Back to Africa vision that electrified black communities across the America and also beyond. And let us talk about this particular movement or association that was formed by Marcus Garvey, the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. It was formed in the year 1914. So you can calculate how old was he from the year 1887 to 1914. You can calculate and get the head of this great leader who saw this movement. Okay, I don't say that he was only the guy who of that particular time who came up with this idea, but he's the founder of this. I can say that he's the founder of this great movement because he came up with the idea of unifying, bringing the unity among all people of African descent. And the aims of the formation of this great association was to uplift people of African descent through mass organization, education, economic enterprises whereby Africans could own and run their own businesses and not the vice versa. Because at that particular era, Africans were not, in many African colonies, many Africans were not allowed to own and run their businesses. They were acting as slaves to the colonial masters. For example, in Kenya, the British, in Tanzania, the Germany, in Ghana, in Senegal, the French, all over the continent. And so he also brought up the political idea of sovereign African nations, federal of African people, whereby African nations could be independent, and also which was summed up in its drive for racial pride, self-help, and worldwide black unity. The UNIA became one of the largest black organizations of that time. We have the contributions of this great leader, Marcus Garvey, to the Pan-Africanism, and one was a vision of a united Africa. And this is the key or the center point of the great movement of Pan-Africanism. United Africa, uniting people of all African descent, uniting, bringing together the people of African descent. And so one of the main contributions of this great guy, Marcus Garvey, was vision of united Africa. He preached the idea of Africans gaining political control from colonial powers or colonial masters. And he also saw Africa not just as a continent, but also as a motherland of all the people of African descent, no matter their places of residences. But they have the origin, or the African descent, the Jamaicans, the Negroes, the Black Americans, and all people of African descent. And this inspired independence movements across the country, across the continent, African continent. For example, Ghana in 1957 gained its independence, and also Kenya in 1963 gained independence, and also Nigeria, among other countries in Africa. Number two, contribution to Pan-Africanism was influence on future leaders, e.g., for example, Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana openly declared himself a disciple of Garvey and carried forward Pan-Africanism thought into African independence movements. And he also led his country to independence in the year 1957. You can read it from African history, particularly Ghana history, and you see the historical timelines when all these major historical events took time. And so we have Jomo Kenyatta, Nnamdi Azikiwe from Nigeria, and Jomo Kenyatta, we said, is from Kenya, my country. I'm from Kenya, by the way. We have Tanzania, Julius Nyerere. We have so many leaders across Africa. And so we have other African nationalists. And also, he did not influence Africa alone. He did not influence Africa alone. He also influenced diaspora. People or figures like Malcolm X carried forward Garvey's spirit in U.S. civil rights struggle. And so I've said that diaspora figures like Malcolm X carried forward Garvey's spirit in U.S. civil rights struggle. And I also want to hold up this point of Malcolm X. He was also from the lineage of this great guy Garvey. And so another point is mass mobilization through the Union. Mass mobilization was also a key factor or a key contribution to Pan-Africanism. As you all know that in Africa at that particular time, there was the main platforms for mobilizing people was through associations, bringing people together, because there was no there were no devices of mass mobilization like the reduced the televisions and all that. So these movements gave a platform for the mobilization of people, and so mass mobilization through this particular movement union was largest mass black organization of its time, and also brought together millions of people of African descent across the Caribbean, Africa, United States, South America, and Europe under one vision of black unity. And lastly, another point is economic self-reliance. Is so that African nations should be self-economic reliant. They should not rely on other countries. They should rely on themselves. African countries were so rich in minerals, were so rich in diversities of cultures. They were so rich in economy. But the people who were exploiting Africa were not the Africans. They were colonial masters. And you found that this economic exploitation from Africa did not benefit Africans, but otherwise it benefited the colonial masters. And so I'm going to leave you with the memorable quotes of this great Pan-Africanist Marcus Garvey. He once said that, and this is particularly on black pride and self-worth. He once said that, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And this was extracted from 1937 speech in Nova Scotia, later made famous in Bob Marley in Redemption song. If you can recall that song, Bob Marley has used this particular phrase. And also on Africa and Pan-Africanism, he said that, in quotes, a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Reminding people of African descent that without their culture, without their history, and without all that thing, their origin, all that they need to know, they could not free themselves from slavery, from these colonial bonds. And so it reminded us this great thing that could free us and also that could see African nations independent and breaking away from all colonial bonds or colonial powers. And by that, maybe the next time we will talk about people like Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi is one of the great leaders, but he didn't. I don't think that he did not take part in Pan-Africanism. But particularly, I will also add this particular guy, Mahatma Gandhi, is also a great leader in the world, not in Pan-Africanism, but we also need to know much about him. So next video I'll do about this Mahatma Gandhi or other leaders on Pan-Africanism. But I also the main reason why I want to do a video on Mahatma Gandhi is because Mahatma Gandhi is the one who led India states to independence, and he provided or he saw or he made a way for African countries to seek independence because the Africans learned from him the way he led his country to independence, breaking his country from whole chains of bondages under the colonial masters, to bringing a new era of independent state. And that's why I want us to talk much about it, because Pan-Africanism and later bringing independence of African states is as a result of the independence of India and Pakistan in 1947 and 1948, isn't it? If you like studying history, you can bear me witness. And for that, maybe it will be the end of our today's video. So could you like, subscribe, share, and also talk about this to your friends so that they may subscribe to my YouTube channel, they may comment, they may share, so that we can continue together, seeing this community growing, seeing this channel growing, and also growing together in history and together as one. Thank you.